Right, welcome to this episode of our program Arab Affairs. As usual, we will be tackling the Arab developments and during this episode we'll be speaking about two important topics. The first one was the first visit by an Egyptian president to Djibouti since its independence in 1977, where this Arab African country has been or has a significant role to play in this upcoming stage. The president was keen to visit Djibouti and to find means of boosting bilateral relations. So, where they also where he met with his Djiboutian counterpart and discussed a number of regional files. The top of them was boosting bilateral relations and the Ethiopian dam. This would be our first segment. Our next segment would be about the developments in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, where Egypt has been making lots of steps in order to maintain and preserve the ceasefire that Egypt has played a great role in reaching that. One of those would be the invitation of Egypt to separate talks of the Palestinians altogether and with the Israelis in order to prepare the ground for a solution or a permanent solution, or in order to maintain the ceasefire from one side, find a just and comprehensive solution to the Palestinian cause. We'll be speaking about that in our episode. Before we delve into our discussion, first let's have a quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week, and we'll come back for more discussion.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received a phone call through video conference from German Chancellor Angela Merkel. During the call, Merkel praised the Egyptian-German friendly ties, which represents a pillar of security and stability in the Middle East. Merkel also stressed the keenness to continue coordination and consultation with President el-Sisi on various regional and international issues of common concern. For his part, President el-Sisi stressed Egypt's keenness to consolidate the existing partnership with Germany, adding that Egypt is looking forward to maximizing bilateral cooperation in various political, economic and security issues. The call tackled a number of regional issues, especially the Palestinian cause. The German Chancellor praised the Egyptian efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement in Gaza. President Sisi emphasized Egypt's vision of the necessity to work immediately to resume direct negotiations between the Palestinians and Israeli sides. Egypt and Sudan have begun a joint military drill aimed at bolstering military cooperation between both countries. The armed forces spokesman said that the joint drill, dubbed the Guardian of the Nile, began in Sudan with the participation of ground, naval and air forces for both countries' armed forces. The exercise included several theatrical and practical presentations to unify combat concepts and exchange training expertise. The United Nations Human Rights Council decided to create an open-ended international investigation into violations surrounding the latest Gaza violence and into systematic abuses in the Palestinian territories and inside Israel. The resolution, which passed with 24 of the Council 47 members in favor, will spur an unprecedented level of scrutiny or abuses and their root causes in the decades-long Middle East conflict. Addressing the session, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said Israeli actions in Palestine during the latest escalation in Gaza violate the highest principles of human rights. Shoukry said Egypt has extended efforts and intensive contacts to end the suffering of the Palestinian people and ensure the exercise of their legitimate rights to allow for the restoration of peace and stability in the region. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry saluted a move it said reflects the determination of international community to move forward the path and accountably law enforcement and protection of Palestinian human rights. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu slammed it as shameful. The United Nations appealed for $95 million to help Palestinians over the next 3 months in the Gaza and West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Lynn Hastings, the UN humanitarian coordinator for the Palestinian territory, said the United Nations was currently looking at immediate aid needs and will then assess the longer-term damage and how much might be needed for reconstruction. On top of the appeal, the United Nations has also already released $22.5 million from another funds to help meet needs. For the 12th consecutive day, Egypt continues the opening of Rafah border crossing to receive stranded and wounded Palestinians from Gaza Strip and to allow aid into the Strip. Border authorities asserted providing the medical and administrative staff needed to ease the crossing of the stranded and injured people, as well as humanitarian cases. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad won a fourth term in office with 95.1% of votes. Assad's government says the election shows Syria is functioning normally despite the decade-old conflict, which has killed hundreds of thousands of people and driven 11 million people, about half the population, from their homes. Head of the parliament, Hamouda Sabah, announced the result in a news conference on Thursday, saying voter turnout was at around 78%. The election went ahead despite the United Nations-led peace process that had called for voting under international supervision that will help pave the way for a new constitution and political settlement. The win delivers Assad 7 more years in power and lengthen his family's rule to nearly 6 decades. His father, Hafez al-Assad, led Syria for 30 years until his death in 2000.
Right, these were the Arab news and the developments that occurred in the Arab world during this week. To highlight the first issue, the first topic that we were speaking about, we have with us over the phone His Excellency, former Foreign Minister Mohammed Al-Arabi. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
We're speaking here about the first visit by an Egyptian president to Djibouti, this Arab African country, and the significance of such a visit for the African issues that were raised and the Arab as well.
Well, I think you just mentioned that Djibouti is an Arab African country and enjoy a very important strategic location in the Horn of Africa. And we can prove that by, the number of the, I would say, international military bases now based in this country. You can find their military bases from France, from China, from Arab Emirates, from different countries, because everybody now recognizes, the importance of this country and the strategic situation and location they enjoy. So I think this is a very important strategic step from our side as Egypt, to pay more attention to this country and try to enlarge the scale of cooperation between Egypt and Djibouti in a different fields, not just, the military fields, but also in other areas. And I think this would be a very good, step by the Egyptian diplomacy to embark on this kind of cooperation with such an important country in the Horn of Africa. And I hope this will maybe be extended to other countries like Somalia or Eritrea, because, we have to enlarge our influence and our cooperation on that place, because it is very important to the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, and we should be there in order to secure our national security.
Mm-hmm. In this very particular visit, the President has made, we're speaking here about the first visit for an Egyptian president to this important country, as you respectively said. We're speaking here about many issues and files that were raised in this visit. We are speaking here about statements that were made by both leaders and a kind of coherence in viewing or in their vision towards matters. How do you view the files that were raised? Can you brief us on those files and the kind of coherence we found in both leaders' vision?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the past, I think Djibouti was always, supporting the Egyptian matters or the Egyptian problems or views. And we never witnessed any kind of contradiction between the two countries in any of the subjects which is now prevailing in our region. And but because Djibouti is, let us say, suffer from some economic weakness in the last few years, I think Egypt should pay more attention to how to enhance the relationship with this country and how to improve the economic values there by, let us say, mending more cooperation and trying to be more helpful to the people. And that's why maybe President Sisi, he ordered to dispatch 2 planes with a lot of humanitarian, subjects. And I think this is the right thing to do, to pay attention to the benefits of the people of this country and to see that Egypt is supporting them and trying to give a boost to the economy there and the healthcare there, which I think was one of the subjects, discussed by President Sisi with the Djibouti's president. I think that the visit it was a very comprehensive and it was a sort of flag to the Egyptian diplomacy towards Africa that we are a country aiming for more cooperation, aiming for the benefits of the African, the Arab people. We are not against, their, I would say, welfare, but we are supporting Tanzania, for instance, to build a new dam there, the Reris Dam. And so I think Egypt now is trying to be more proactive in Africa, and I think we will gain and we will have a lot of good results for this policy in the near future.
This visit has 3 axes. I mean, here the bilateral one, the regional one in terms of Arab and African files, and the international one. Yes, indeed. Egypt there, or the 2 sides agreed to establish an Egyptian logistic zone in Djibouti and increasing investments in all this in terms of boosting relations. We're speaking also about African issues, and particularly the Djed, where this aspect was very much raised by both presidents and they spoke about it. How did you read the statements made by President Sisi and President Gula?
Well, I think it shows a lot of consistency in our policy that Egypt is aiming to have legal binding, agreement for the 3 countries in order to proceed with the idea of having, this dam in Ethiopia. And I think it was a very, I would say, fair position from our side when President Sisi, at the beginning of this issue, said that the right for living and the right for development. We have the right to live, as Egyptians and Sudanese, and also Ethiopia has the right to develop their countries, but without any kind of, hindering the Egyptian and Sudanese rights for having the proper amounts of water regularly. So this position, I think, was conveyed to our brothers in Djibouti, and I think it is very good for the Egyptian diplomacy to adopt such steps in order to explain the Egyptian, or let us say the fairness of the Egyptian position in that regard. And I think there is a sort of support to the Egyptian position and more understanding now to our endeavor in order to keep the momentum of the negotiation. In the meantime, we show to everybody that we cannot relinquish our rights for the water of the Nile, and Egypt will be very firm if something will hinder the substantial amount of water which we are receiving every year.
Yes, and it was very much agreed between both presidents on this issue, since we're speaking about same interests. If we take to the international issues and the issue of counter-terrorism and illegal migrancy, and we're speaking here about Egypt, which is on the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and Djibouti on the Red Sea, and has its position towards El Mendeb Gate. So, can you tell us how significant is such cooperation between Egypt and Djibouti for international issues?
Well, as you just mentioned, the combating terrorism now, it has another dimension, let us say, in our region or Africa. Because, you know, the terrorist groups now starting to embark on a new, to explore a new places could harbor them in Africa. And you will find the rise of the fundamentalism in different countries, even in a country like Mozambique. You can find, you know, a lot of groups there. They are trying to control the north part of the country in Congo. Also the same thing. And that's why I think President Sisi paid more attention to the links between Al-Azhar and Djibouti. And most of the Djibouti students actually here in Egypt, they are students in Al-Azhar University. So I think we should, you know, stress on this point that Al-Azhar should have a place in Djibouti in order to enhance the moderate ideas there, and this is, I think, will be the first step to combat, you know, any kind of fundamentalism in that country. So I think this approach is very important and very good for both countries. And in the meantime, I think this might, you know, weaken the attempts of the terrorist groups to spread in Africa. And I think if you will witness what's going on in Mali and Chad and in Niger, and of course Nigeria and Somalia, I think all these places now subject to the spread of the terrorist groups. And that's why we should protect Djibouti, because, you know, Djibouti, if they will be there, this will be a catastrophe for many countries and even for the international trade, you know, facilities and international trade corridors. So I think that was a very important strategic step from our side to help Djibouti in that regard.
Right, yes, very much indeed. Your Excellency, former Foreign Minister Mohamed Al-Arabi, we thank you so much for being with us over the phone and for your input here. And before we move on to our next topic, let's have this quick report and then we'll come back for more discussion.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi arrived home after paying a historic visit to Djibouti, where he held summit talks with Djibouti President Ismail Omar Guelleh. At a joint press conference following their talks, President el-Sisi hailed his talks with President Guelleh as constructive, which covered a number of issues, including facilitating the access of Egyptian products to Djiboutian markets. The President expressed appreciation for the warm reception and the hospitality of the Djiboutian people and for being the first Egyptian president to visit Djibouti. Presidential spokesperson Bassem Radi said that during the talks, President el-Sisi affirmed Egypt's keenness on boosting bilateral ties in all fields. Radi said the two leaders had agreed on need to reach a just and legally binding agreement on the filling of the reservoirs of Egyptia's dam and rules for operating it. They agreed on boosting cooperation between the two countries on fighting terrorism in the Horn of Africa. Speaker of the Arab Parliament Adel Abdurrahman Al-Assoumi hailed President Sisi's visit to Djibouti as it deepens the Arab-African ties. El Assoumi expressed appreciation for the efforts exerted by President Sisi in boosting pan-Arab ties and bolstering joint strategic partnership between the peoples of the Arab region. He stressed that this mobility towards the African continent in the era of President Sisi reflects the Egyptian will, before all parties, to build new and strong strategic relations in a way that guarantees security and stability in the whole region. Speaker of the Arab Parliament also praised Egypt's support for Djibouti after Egypt sent medical and food aid to its Arab African sister country.
Right, and to another area where Egypt is also bolstering its work and efforts in order to bolster the Arab Commonwealth and be able to play a role in solving the Arab conflicts and crises. And this time we're speaking here about the Egyptian role in the Palestinian ceasefire and its continuous efforts in order to reach a very just and comprehensive solution to the Palestinian-Israeli issue. I guess we have with us over the phone Ambassador Mohammed Hariri, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, madam.
Yes, Ambassador Hussein, we're speaking here about the latest developments regarding the scene in the Palestinian territories. We're speaking here about an Egyptian invitation that was made for Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli sides that will be a kind of separate talks in order to preserve a ceasefire and work for a solution. You're reading to the Egyptian efforts that were made during the past period and its contacts with its partners in order to work on emphasizing such a ceasefire.
Well, I guess the main drive behind Egyptian diplomacy these days is the consolidation of the ceasefire and hopefully to turn this ceasefire agreement of May 22nd into a long-term truce that could hopefully prepare the ground for the resumption of peace negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis that were interrupted by Jewish settlements in the West Bank back in April 2014. And I guess Egypt is cooperating with with Jordanians, with the Palestinian Authority, and as well as with the Israeli government for such consolidation. Add to that our interest in starting the reconstruction effort in Gaza as quickly as possible, in collaboration and cooperation with the United Nations, with the Palestinian Authority, with the American administration, and with the European Union. As you may know, the Americans and the Europeans would like their contributions to the reconstruction efforts to go through the Palestinian Authority, and I guess there is an acceptance of that. On the other hand, the Israelis don't want reconstruction efforts to start before the release of two Israeli citizens and the bodies and the return of bodies of some Israeli soldiers that Hamas has. So Egypt is trying hard right now to consolidate the ceasefire and to coordinate reconstruction efforts in Gaza, taking into account the sad fact that the humanitarian situation as well as the health and power situation in Gaza is in a very bad shape indeed. And so this is what are the main immediate objectives of Egyptian diplomacy right now. Of course, we all hope that someday peace negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis would start again, but many observers believe this day is quite far off.
Well, we can never say, we can never be pessimistic, and in that regard, in that very particular regard, Egypt has been working on the Arab arena and the international arena as well. We have seen here lots of visits made, first calls by the US President, by the German Chancellor Merkel, by the European Union officials, plus, of course, the visit of the Qatari foreign minister and the contacts between the president and many of the Arab leaders in this regard. Let me see here you reading to the foreign minister or the US foreign minister visit to Egypt and his talks with the president. It's not a visit to Egypt, actually it was a visit or a tour to the Middle East at large, but here Egypt took a little bit longer. And there were statements made by the US foreign minister from here. How do you view the US position, particularly towards the Palestinian issue after the recent developments?
Well, the official declaration and official statements by the Biden administration as far as the Palestinian question is concerned are encouraging. The Biden administration has revived the two-state solution. The Biden administration has talked about the equal rights of Palestinians and Israelis, and this is the first in American discourse concerning the Palestinian question. They have equal rights to security, prosperity, and democracy. And as a matter of fact, one of the aims behind the tour that Mr. Anthony Blinken, the United States Secretary of State, made last week to the Middle East was just to test the water. Whether the parties concerned are willing to get involved into peace negotiations once again. One of the major objectives of the Biden administration right now is the consolidation of the ceasefire and reconstruction efforts in Gaza.
Yes.
On the other hand, Mr. Blinken announced that the United States intends to reopen the American consulate in East Jerusalem, which was closed by the former American president, Mr. Donald Trump. And in the meantime, the American administration announced that it would provide the Palestinians and those United Nations agencies working with the Palestinians, like UNRWA, with almost $300 million US. So I guess the Biden administration is much more forthcoming and than the Trump administration. But now, of course, we have to wait. We have to wait to see if the Biden administration is willing to expend some political capital on the resumption of peace talks between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
But when we hear the statements that were made by the U.S. Foreign Minister here here in Egypt, Mr. Blinken, when he came to Egypt for the first time, for an instant, he raised the Palestinian humanitarian aspect. And for, I mean, here, when he spoke, he didn't speak from the perspective of just securing the Israeli rights or the Israeli right of defense, but he also spoke about the importance of finding a solution for the humanitarian aspect of the cause. So are we seeing a kind of change of course from the American administration towards the Palestinian issue, and how do you view the Egyptian role in clarifying the situation for the American administration?
Well, as I understand it, when the American administration speaks about the humanitarian situation, it means, first of all, the destruction wrought by the Israeli aggression against Gaza earlier this month.
But they also brought about the issue of the children and women who were killed in such strikes, and that was also raised.
Yes, that's, you can consider this one of the consequences of the Israeli aggression against Gaza.
Yes.
The killing of children, women, targeting of hospitals, of infrastructure, of schools, of height of towers. So I mean, of course, there is some change in the American position, and when I refer to the American position, not only limited to the administration, but also to the American media and American public opinion. Last week, we saw a demonstration in Manhattan, New York City, against the Israeli aggression, and we have seen some members in the Democratic Party that have called on the Biden administration to take more forceful measures and more forceful positions vis-à-vis Israel. But of course, these are positive changes. We welcome it. But the question is whether the Biden administration at the present moment is willing to push the Israelis to show flexibility and to push the Israelis to sit around the negotiating table with the Palestinians. Having said that, of course, the domestic situation in Palestine and the domestic situation in Israel, in all fairness, don't augur well for the very foreseeable future for resumption of peace talks. On one hand, the Palestinians are still struggling to have a unity government, a national unity government, and the Israelis don't have a government yet, and maybe they will have Israelis would be called to a fifth general election in the span of 2 years and on 2 years. That if this is the case, that will be the fifth general election from April 2019. So politically speaking, as far as the Israelis and the Palestinians are concerned, many observers, and I think they are right in that, they have to put their house in order if really we will see a resumption of peace talks between them.
Indeed, indeed. And you raised here a very important issue, the Palestinian elections that were postponed because of the incidents and the Israeli elections and its results and how it will reflect on the whole issue very much indeed. Right, returning back to what we were speaking about, and another area where Egypt has been trying to consolidate is the Arab area, where Egypt is trying to maintain a kind of strategic consultation and coordination with Arab countries. And we have seen here the visit of the Qatari foreign minister and Egypt's contact with a number of Arab leaders. How do you view such consultation and coordination? How do you view the importance of an Arab united position towards the challenges and threats facing the region?
Well, of course, the official visit paid by the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Qatar to Cairo in the last few days is a very welcome development not only in Egyptian-Qatari relations, but in Egyptian Gulf relations, and within the Arab sphere at large. Of course, this visit comes in the wake as a result of the Al-Ula declaration, Al-Ula summit in Saudi Arabia last January, that augured for the resumption of diplomatic relations between the 4 Arab countries that severed them with Qatar in 2017, namely Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. And bilaterally, the visit by the Qatari Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister was very positive, and he handed to President Sisi an official invitation from the Emir of Qatar, His Highness Emir Tamim, to pay an official visit to Doha. Of course, this is a very positive development. Egypt has always maintained, has always advocated Arab solidarity, and this visit turns the page of a sad chapter in inter-Arab relations and politics. Yes. That's the way I look at it, and we will certainly will build on it, and to the benefit, to the advantages of both people, the Egyptian and the Qatari people, and for both governments.
Right. Ambassador Mohammed Hariri from Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for being with us over the phone and for your input here. Before we end, we'll have a quick look on this report, and then we'll come back for the end up.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received on Wednesday U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The meeting tackled the developments of the Palestinian cause and ways to revive the Middle East peace process in the wake of the latest developments in the Palestinian territories. During the meeting, Blinken praised the Egyptian efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement in Gaza as well as the efforts to maintain it. Meanwhile, President el-Sisi praised the United States' full support for the Egyptian efforts. The president noted that the recent developments necessitate the immediate resumption of Palestinian-Israeli direct negotiations with an active engagement from Washington. President el-Sisi also reiterated Egypt's keenness on cooperation with the United States in this regard and stressed Egypt's firm position to reach a just and fair resolution that guarantees the rights of the Palestinian people according to international references. The talks also covered the file of combating terrorism and extremism, as well as a number of regional files, including the Libyan file. The meeting also tackled the Ethiopian dam file, as President Sisi stressed the importance to reach a just, fair and binding legal agreement on filling and operating the dam and achieve the common goals of all sides. Blinken headed home from Jordan Thursday after a Middle East tour in which he called for regional cooperation to consolidate a ceasefire between Israeli and Palestinian people. During his tour, Blinken met both Israeli and Palestinian leaders during 2 days of talks, throwing Washington's support behind the Egyptian brokered truce that ended 11 days of heavy Israeli bombing of Gaza.
At the end of our episode, remains to be seen how Egypt's efforts will culminate into real consolidation to a solution to the Palestinian issue. I guess Egypt's policy has been in the middle of many files in this recent period. Remains to be seen. We'll be updating you with the developments. Next Saturday will be other important Arab developments. Until then, it's goodbye.